I'm Tony Sklar with bnetTV. We are here at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona for 2012. I am speaking with Ciena's Chuck Kaplan. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. Fantastic venue as per usual, but wonderful show and great weather.
It's a fantastic venue. The weather is a lot better this year than it was last year.
Been a big topic of conversation, and it's kind of funny how weather inevitably affects people's moods, which inevitably affect sales.
It is a totally up show. Everybody's excited. A lot of new stuff is happening, and we see ourselves at a kind of tipping point where people are really having to change the way we build networks, change the way we design them, because we're dealing with a new set of issues.
So we're going to get right into the idea. Let's start off with where Ciena sits within the ecosystem, what problems you solve.
Right, so in the mobile ecosystem, we do not sit from the cell tower out to the handset. That's other folks. But from the cell tower in the backhaul network all the way back through the metro and into the core, that's where Ciena plays. And in fact, when we talk about adding value, our issue is in that part of the network, how do we improve cost? How do we improve performance?
So definitely backhaul core infrastructures are at the top of the food chain for the end consumer without them even realizing it, because the over-the-top players, which is what people are consuming at this point, they want to see YouTube videos or other videos. They want to, they want to consume that data at a really high rate. It's all up to you.
Well, interestingly, if you look back, let's say 5 or 10 years ago, one of the questions was, can I connect?
Oh, right.
And now connectivity, a lot of that problem is solved. So the problem has shifted to the quality of connectivity, because I'm actually doing different things on the network than I did 5 or 10 years ago.
So there's a lot of different factors that come into play in the backhaul infrastructure arena, but we've got some legacy technology issues that we have to be dealt with. People aren't just going to dump equipment. They're not going to increase CapEx just for, if it's not broken, you don't need to replace it kind of thing. But then you're going to augment it with something else. There are a lot of standards that have not really one has been better than another, whether it's been TSTP, MPLS, TSTP, or Metro Ethernet, or there's a lot of different things in there.
Yeah, there are, and the problem, and this has been a pretty well-known problem for quite a while, which we and most other folks have addressed, which is how do you add new kinds of services, 3G and 4G services on top of the older, 2G services. So we have equipment that handles in a cost-effective, consolidated way all of the legacy kinds of services, because they don't just go away, as you said, but also how to add the new ones on top of them. But that problem really has been fairly well known and fairly well addressed. Now there's a new category of problem because of the new kinds of services that we're really addressing now. And if I can jump into that.
Yeah, let's go right into it.
So if you look at how we're using networks, we're using networks inherently differently than we did in the past.
Right.
One way, when you look at the packet flows, we're seeing really large packet flows. For example, when I watch a YouTube video, that's a different size of flow than if I was chatting or checking a stock quote.
Right.
So one was a very small transaction, and one is a much larger transaction. In fact, it's a transaction where you want to set up something that looks like a connection. So we say connection-oriented, where you resolve the IP address once, but then you send a lot of packets from point A to point B.
Okay.
So when we look at how can Ciena improve the performance and improve the economics in this new world, we talk about handling packets in different ways. You handle certain kinds of packets with a high IP touch, where you're actually doing more work per packet.
Okay.
And we handle other kinds of flows, like video flows, or like wireless backhaul, which looks like a really big static pipe, or the data that's going from one data center to another in a cloud environment. And these are really big, massive data flows. We want to treat those by doing less work per packet. And that's how we improve the economics, and that's how we improve the performance.
I'm going to ask a question first, and then I want to circle back to it's kind of loaded this way, but what makes Ciena the better company for than some of your competitors in the market space? Let's start with that, and then I'm going to circle back to what we're talking about.
So a lot of the technology that we've seen in the core, let's say the IP core, was oriented towards solving a different problem. It wasn't really oriented towards solving a connection-oriented problem. But that is the kind of problem that Ciena has been solving for 8 or 10 years now. So in other words, the problems that we've solved for carrier class, carrier grade packet transport, carrier class packet networking, the problems that we've solved 10 years ago is now become the most important way to solve the problem for the new kind of traffic that we see happening in the network.
So then the loaded question inevitably ensues this. The over-the-top players who are kind of a very good flavor here at this particular conference because the YouTubes and the Netflix of the world are getting a free ride, so to speak, on top of the network that the end consumer is, the more food we put on the table, the more the consumer is going to eat kind of deal. So there are, and as you said, so there's the video, which is being consumed at the higher rates now because the device manufacturers have really improved the devices and the processing power to be able to do that. The network guys are sitting there going, wow, ouch, right? Like, this is going to hurt. I got to put in my 4G infrastructures, but I've got to offload at particular areas, and I want my sons to be able to recognize I want this data to go over here and I want this data to go over here.
So this is exactly the point, is that you put the intelligence in the network to look at the flows and figure out which ones need to go through a high IP touch or a routed network versus which ones should bypass and go to a data center where you're streaming video. So it's about network intelligence and having the intelligence to know where to route the traffic, and then having the infrastructure to get it there, doing less work per packet. So we're saving money and getting it there faster.
So is there new infrastructure or new technologies that Ciena has put into the market space or is going to put into the market space that we can actually talk about that is exciting enough to be like, that the consumer is going to be like, hurry up and get it done?
Well, sure. In days past, we would have talked about Ethernet LANs or VLANs,
right.
And we would have talked about PBB, PBBTE, so certain kinds of packet tunneling protocols, which is ways of using really layer 2 technologies to get packets in a sort of a transport class.
Right.
The newer version, the newer protocol there is MPLS-TP, or the transport profile,
right.
And everybody's developing it.
Right.
The standards are a little bit later in coming, but the point there, while all of us will develop to these standards because that's what standards are for,
right.
There's an advantage to be had for people who have been doing this packet transport for a long time because the OAM,
yep.
the OAM, the actual functionality in OAM is essentially the same in the new paradigm,
right.
as it has been for all of this packet transport, packet tunneling that we've been doing for years and years. While the protocol changes, the OAM functions are very similar. And we're obviously we have an advantage in that just for having done it, for having focused on that for such a long time.
So Ciena is well positioned here in the ecosystem to start to plug some of these holes that are going to exist as the carriers are switching into these newer style of transport mechanisms because of the over-the-top consumption that's sort of come down the pipe. The moment that Samsung comes out with a better processor, new higher-end device, the more that consumer is going to want to make sure that their video can be watched while they're on the train going from one network to another.
So that pattern will continue, and it will be only more so.
Right.
So videos is
without forgetting still Metro Ethernet and the other standards that exist within the ecosystem, because those are things that we can't forget about.
Sure. Well, they all still exist, but over time you'll see us all starting to use MPLS-TP as the transport vehicle.
Right.
But it will become more and more important because we're consuming in these newer and different ways. We're consuming with bigger packet flows. So that train has left the station and is accelerating.
And at a rapid pace. So that sort of brings us back to the beginning of the conversation, that this showed that the numbers are up around 60,000, which is well over an increase of 10%. Well over last year.
So you can see there are certain times in history where what you're going to do this year kind of resembles what you were doing last year, which kind of resembles the year before.
Right.
And then there are certain times in history when you say that change was happening faster.
Right.
It looks like a shift in the way we think. This is what's happening here. It's a shift in the way we design our networks, and this fundamental shift is really caused by the need to do packet traffic handling in two different ways.
Right.
And that is a fundamental shift in the way we design networks.
Well, Ciena is well positioned within the market space and a leader in the market space to be able to take action on making sure that end consumer experience is happening. And I appreciate you taking the opportunity to speak with us here today. And I know that we're going to be having ensuing conversation regarding some of the holes that have been plugged and what has sprung up over on some other side.
That sounds like an ongoing conversation, and yes, it's all about the customer experience.
Fantastic. I've been speaking with Ciena's Chuck Kaplan. I am Tony Sklar here at Mobile World Congress for bnetTV.